He displayed it in his support of my vision and came to my aid when I needed it the most. I didn't see him at all for the last part of his life, and I'm very sad about that. I miss him very much. There will be no more like that man, Eric Clapton. I'd like to invite Mr. Barry Gibb to say a few words.
I'm happy to. Wow. Watching that. Can you hear me? Yeah. I can't. I was watching all these pictures and there are just too many crazy, ridiculous stories that we could probably all tell, right? So I just generalize. We arrived in February 1967 in England to be told that, and people love this, to be told that bands were out. And that we shouldn't bother, we should go back to Australia. And we never really accepted that. We just felt we were on some kind of path. And then we met this gentleman named Robert Stigwood. We had been around trying to get signed up by other people who all turned us down. The great organisation in particular turned us down with the saying that bands were out. So we finally got a call from this man who we thought was Mr. Stigwood. But it wasn't me that took the call, it was my mother, so, you know. Mr. Stigwood on the phone. And we sort of went to see him, he asked to see us, and because Dad had sent all these records to NEMS, as well as other people, he'd sent demos and stuff like that ahead of our journey to England. So there we are in Robert's office, and he has giant sideburns. He was very much what you would call an aristocrat, without actually being an aristocrat. But he had a way about him. I'll say, Robert was two people, right? He could be two people very easily. He was so full of love, and the thing about Robert is if he had faith in you, not if he had an astute business sense, or if he had faith. And if Robert saw potential in you, that was his faith. And nobody could sway that. And that was the nature of the man. If you let Robert, he gave us something to live up to. He gave us something to live up to. We had to prove ourselves then. I'll sign you for 5 years. Okay. Now we had to live up to it because he was that kind of man. And so we went ahead and made the first album, and we did about 10 demos. And he said, you know, I still don't hear a single. It's all very nice, but go outside and write another song. Oh, Jesus. So we went outside, we were in the old Polydor Stratford Places, and we went out and sat in the elevator, next to the elevator in the dark. And that's how New York Mining Disaster came to be, because we were sitting in the dark. And the echo was fantastic, and so we brought that back in and said, well, this is the new idea, and okay, record it. And that was the beginning of it. But here was a man who had the capacity to give you so much love and so much faith. And if you, in his business, in his company, if you did something that didn't live up to what he wanted, he could be an absolute tyrant. And he absolutely was. So I love the man for those things. You know, we were always, oh my God, Robert's losing his temper again. And he'd stamp his feet and he'd scream at people. And so we witnessed all of that. And then Brian died, and I remember moving the furniture into Brook Street with Robert and Martin Weston. I remember moving the furniture, and it's a great, great vivid memory for me, all of it. He was a wonderful man, and every year on the 1st of May, I was telling David, he would call me on the 1st of May, and I don't know why. I think there was something in his mind that made that day particularly special.
And what did you do?
I don't know, honestly, Patrick. Well, a number of things.
You sang him a song.
He would always make me sing the 1st of May, so that was it. I don't know why it was so important, but he always called on that day. I might not hear from him for another year, but he still called on the 1st of May. So but this 1st of May, he didn't call. and that's when the penny dropped. Robert's not here anymore.
Wow.
And all I can say is, somebody asked me the other day during an interview, do we need Roberts? Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Do we need giants who have faith in us and make us perform and make us live up to something that person believes? I always wrote songs to please Robert, and I think we always needed that. I think Andrew, you know that feeling. You know that feeling when you're writing to please somebody else, and I think it's very special. And it's one of those things that we love doing. You know, other people are doing it to you now. They're writing to please you, and we were writing to please Rob. Anyway, that's me.
Awesome.
I miss him greatly. I always look forward to the phone call, even though it will never come. And I thank you all for coming. And bless you all. Thank you.
I was 25 years old, label manager. Billy Oakes was there. Bill and I were there together, and the boys, Barry, Robin, and Morris, and Eric were there, and Andrew and Tim. With Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat, the first records we ever released, and Pete Townsen. Where's Pete? You hear that, Pete? Yeah. Pete, Robert Stigwood said, right, we've got to get something going. I said, the doggy window didn't really work, Robert. I know that. Right. Okay, let's do something special. And Pete Townsen got Eric together with Rick Gretsch, and the boys, they did the album at the Rainbow Theatre, Eric Clapton live at the Rainbow. And it was our first album on RSO Records. Then we had Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, Andrew and Tim, and then Barry came in with their album as well. And then Arif Mardin, it went on like that. It was Lonely Days, Skip, those times. It was. Yeah, remember? Howdy Many Broken Heart. At the time, Skippy, the three of you, there was a break. There was a little, perhaps a period of time when you were maybe... A pause. There was a pause. So I'm saying to Robert, Pete, if I'm the label manager, I go to sell. There's nothing going on here. So Pete got Eric together. We did the Joseph with Andrew, whatever. It's fantastic. And then Saturday Night Fever in Greece, and it became the #1 independent record label in the world. Mm-hmm. Robert Stigwood was fantastic. Oh Calcutta, Jesus Christ Superstar, The Dirtiest Show in Town, all those singers and dancers, all those young people creating the dream. Stiggy always supported them. So anyway, he had this yacht called the Serena. And we all went out on this yacht, Skip, right? We're out in the Mediterranean. Ahmed Erdogan, Jerry Wexler, Tommy Dowd, Robert, me. Were you there, Patrick? Were you there? Right. Anyway, let me tell you. I've got to tell you this because this is a seriously lovely man. I wish he was here. We hit the rocks. There was a storm. There was a tempest. And the Serena, which was fantastic. It was fantastic. Men in white coats. Fantastic gloves. Champagne. It's all very, very class flair. Anyway, we hit the rocks. And they all jumped overboard. Ahmed Erdogan, Jerry Wexler, and Tommy Dowd, they all got on this boat and they all fucked off to Athens. And I said, Robert, he said, I can't swim. I said, well, nor can I. Well, so what? What do you want, glass or white wine? I said, make it a large one, 7 yards long, 3 knobs of ice, one for yourself. And we sat there because we couldn't swim. And the Serena was going smash, smash, crash. This is God's truth, Patrick. I'm telling you, this is God's truth. Pete, we then get towed out. And the law of the sea in those days was the tugs would hover like vultures around the boat. And if they pulled the Serena in, they would get a percentage of the value of the yacht. So if the yacht was $20 million, they would get $2 million, blah, blah, blah. So they're all hovering around. We get pulled into the port there, Patrick. And all the people that jumped overboard looked also embarrassed. Ahmed, hey, Robert, hey, oh, hey, what's going on, what's going on? So sorry, we all jumped overboard, and Stiggy and I walked off still holding the glasses of wine and all that, like some heroes. But the fact is, we couldn't swim. But you know, Baz, and I know people say for you, and I know Andrew's going to come up next. We all have the memories of him, but I will always remember him as somebody, who, a 25-year-old bloke from North London, was given the chance to run a record label, which became the greatest record label in the world. Started my friendship with Barry and the boys and Andrew and Tim, Pete and everything, and I can't think of anybody alive today, Pete, who would do that. They look into all your CVs and your social network and all this bollocks and all that. But the thing was, he gave me the job. You know, we got on well. I loved him. He was a great man, and I'm very privileged to be here. I'm very proud. And I'm going to pass the microphone over to Andrew Lloyd Webber. He said, and what happened, Patrick? The Beatles were going there. George Martin, it was all doing very well. Love Me Do, Please Please Sir. And Robert saw this and he said, right, record producer, Johnny Remember Me, Wild Wind. And John Layton, model becomes pop star. John Layton, Johnny Remember Me, Wild Wind, #1. Robert Stigwood, record producer. It's all about the clout. It's all about, Patrick, what it is in life. It's Townsen was jumping about, there's Doc Martens, fucking, you know, can't explain, fantastic. He knows what it's like to be entertainers, but Stiggy was the catalyst who gave us all the chance to do the things we did. And you know, this makes me sad, Patrick, because I know he'd love to be here. Thank you.
And he believed. He was like a mentor, because he was always there. Not really saying anything, but he was always there. And so he bought, I was with Gorton and the Simpsons, Mike and Eric Sykes, all famous people. And he bought this company, and the only one he made sign a contract was me. And that was, I remember thinking, I've got a worth. I had never thought of it, that I had a worth, you know. And so he made me managing director, and the others were all a bit flabbergasted about that. And he said, she needs a title so that other people know who she is and what she does. So there I was in Mayfair with my title. And then he said, you must have a proper car and a chauffeur. And sent me round the corner with Barclays with my chauffeur and to buy a Rolls. And he gave us £3,250, and we were, you know, overwhelmed until we got to Barclays, who were very snippy about £3,250. They said, we don't have anything as cheap as that. So we didn't buy it there, and we went off and bought a lovely pale blue one from somewhere for £2,000. So that was good. But he was so kind. I remember the first board meeting we had, and there was David, the finance, and me, and I think it was Keith Turner. Yeah. Robert not there, Robert in America, and David said, Robert wants us to buy a record called Jesus Christ Superstar, these two young boys, and he wants to put it on in the theatre. Well, we'd not heard anything, you know, we didn't know anything about anything, so we're supposed to approve this. Well, AX, his company, and so we're all sitting there, and we said, well, I mean, if he says we should be doing it, of course we should be doing it. And so that was where I first heard about that. When I went to see him the very first time, when he wanted to buy our company with Gordon Simpson people, and he sent the rolls, the white rolls round, you'll all remember it, with the hood down. I was so impressed sitting in his car. He was just so lovely the way he talked about things, and just really, really encouraging. All through, you know, life. I mean, going to America, I'd never done that before, really, and he just only ever said one thing to me, well, just get on with it, really, he said. And you found you could, because he was there, this little silent mentor at the back, and I'm very grateful to him. I was very fortunate, if that's the word, that his birthday was in April and so was mine, and we always sent each other flowers for years and years and years. And we always rang each other. And I rang to wish him a happy birthday. And usually when you rang, I'm sure you've all experienced this, whoever answered the phone would say, just a moment, and then gone a long time, then come back and say, he'll call you back. Which of course he never ever did. Except this one time that I rang to say happy birthday, and the boy said, just a moment. And within seconds he was on the phone and said, hello darling. And we had a lovely chat, and we talked about getting together to have tea soon. And the next day he dies. So I feel happy that I did speak to him. But I miss him very much.
Thank you, Beryl.
Be here and to see some old friends and catch up with a few people that I know of and haven't met. So it's been good to or didn't know that I'd met. And it's interesting because for me, Robert was always somebody who was on the side of my life and career, but incredibly important. And I've got the great pleasure now to disagree with something that David said, which is that RSO was not the first record label.
Right.
It was a record label called Reaction.
Right.
And the one record that they released was in late 1966 when the Who were in big trouble. We had a legal suit with our record producer and with Decca Records. We were receiving at the time 1/4%, and of that our wonderful managers Kit and Chris would take 40%. And so we weren't making very much money despite having had 3 hits. And we needed a shelter record label, and we needed somebody who was willing to take a big legal risk, and Robert did it. He created Reaction Records. He put out our record Substitute. It got higher than My Generation in the charts. It got to number 4, and he saved our bacon. We lost the legal case in the end, but from then, after that, watching that, Kit Lambert and Chris Stamp, who were often credited with creating the first independent record label, they didn't. Robert did. They created Track, which then was most famous for signing Jimi Hendrix. Track was first artist was The Who, of course, and then Marsha Hunt and Thunderclap Newman, who I produced, and Mark Bolan, and then T-Rex. And but Robert was there, and he was a great ally. And the reason he was there is that briefly he'd given Kit and Chris offices in his place in New Cavendish Street. I don't know whether. Yeah. Is that the right street? Yeah. And he was also, as you said earlier, he was promoting us on tours and concerts. And one thing that I remember about him is that he summoned me one day into his office in New Cavendish Street, and he said, I would like you to write a song for one of my artists. Nobody had ever asked me to do that. Nobody had ever asked me. I was writing dozens and dozens and dozens of songs for The Who. Nobody had ever said to me, write a song for somebody else. And he wanted a song for an artist who the stage name was Oscar. It was his lawyer's son, Paul Nicholas, who was in Tommy, the movie of Tommy. And I'd love Paul. I haven't seen him for years. Anyway, I said, what kind of song do you want? He said, I want a song that's about, Paul's a solo artist, he's on his own. I want him to feel as though he's part of a gang. And I said, got it. And I went away and I wrote a song called Join My Gang. And the lyrics were, you can join my gang even though you're a girl. The ultimate sexist. You could get away with it then. And pages passed, and never lost touch with Stiggy, as we used to call him. He was a great friend of Kit Lambert and Chris Stamp, Who managers. He adored Chris because Chris was so beautiful, but he also adored and bemoaned and regretted and abhorred the tragedy of Kit Lambert when Kit Lambert started to go down. And he and I often had conversations of how we might be able to help Kit and save Kit. Kit died prematurely, and Chris thankfully survived. He only died a couple of years ago. And but when the Tommy film came along, that story is rather complicated, so I won't go into it. But again, he came in like the 7th Cavalry and saved it was a Hammer production that developed the actual, and it was Hammer that brought in Ken Russell. And I remember having a conversation with Robert saying, well, I love Ken Russell films. I love Ken Russell. But are you sure he's the right man for the job? I can only say this because good old Ken is gone now. Are you sure he's the right man for the job? And Robert said, just don't worry. I'll deal with him. And of course he didn't deal with him at all. About 40 years later, 30 years later, I started to get phone calls from Robert from when he was living on the Isle of Wight. And he said, I want to do a remake of Tommy. I want to do a rap version, and he was a bit pissed, of course. And it's going to be animated, and that means that we can use all kinds of people who can't act. And I've just had a phone call with the manager of U2, is that what they called U2? And their singer Bono has agreed to be the voice of Tommy for $1 million, and I've sent a check this evening. And in the paper the next day there was a story about this. I can't remember when it was, but it was a long time ago. And since then we talked and talked and talked and talked. In the meantime, in between those two, and that was the last really series of conversations I had with Robert. Tremendous excitement that this movie might get made again. When we were making the movie, I should just say a few things about it. Robert was such a supporter for me. I'd never done a movie before. I'd never done the music for it. The technology then was terrifyingly difficult. Ken was very, very difficult to work with. There were no computers. I had this wonderful music director, Terry Rawlings, who was actually an editor, who helped me deal with some of the technical problems that I had as I went along. But the main supporter was Robert. I remember he said, listen, Pete, just make the record. Just gather the tracks together, mix them for a record. This is the business we know. We know how to do this. We know how to make records. Ken Russell knows how to make films. We know how to make records. And we put the record out, and in America it went straight to #1. It was the second time Tommy had been at #1, or the third time. First time was when we first put it out, second time was Woodstock. Never thought I'd ever see it again. It went up to #1 again. And one thing, I just want to read this. Robert was in New York, and Chris and I went to see him. I think it was at somewhere like the Apthorpe, or a posh. He was in this flat.
Waldorf Tower.
Was it?
Waldorf Tower?
Yeah, it was at the very top. Yeah. And we went and we talked and we got drunk. And as I was leaving, and he I don't know whether to say this or not. I've written it, but it's hard to say it. Not many men hit on me. And you know, in the 60s, it was very cool to be gay. It was very brave to be gay because it was illegal. You had to have tremendous courage to be publicly gay. And I really wanted to be publicly gay. I wasn't gay, but I wanted to pretend to be publicly gay. And I really wanted somebody spectacularly good looking like Chris Stamp to try it on with me, and he did. Or somebody incredibly interesting and charismatic like Kit Lambert, and I lived with Kit for a year and he never hit on me. He used to bring in these rent boys and Robert hit on me. I had to turn him down. I'll tell you why I had to turn him down. We were on a fucking aeroplane. And he hit on me on the basis that he'd already hit on me before. He said, I remember the last time and I was very embarrassed because I came on to you and I muddled it up. And now, and he was, he was so afraid of flying. He was so fearful of flying. The only way he could fly was to be completely paralytic. Anyway, I'm at this towers with him. And as I'm leaving, he says, Pete, I have something to say to you. He said, I'm pretty sure this is exactly what he said. You have to write something new, like Tommy, that will help keep me in the custom to which I've become unmannered. Will help keep me in the custom to which I've been unmannered. I said, I'm not sure you got that right, Robert. Anyway, I miss him terribly, and it's so great to meet so many people that spent so much time really, really close to him. You guys, of course, Barry used to use the same studio as we did, IBC. We saw a lot of you. I remember seeing probably more of Robin and Morris than of you, Barry, but I remember seeing a lot of you. That's right, and of course getting drunk in the speakeasy, that's another story. But Robert was, everything that's been said is true, but Robert for me was somebody who came into my personal life as an immensely positive force, an immensely positive presence in a number of different roles. Both as somebody who commissioned me as a songwriter, and sadly Join My Gang wasn't a hit for Paul Nicholas or me, but it was so great to be asked, and I'm not going to say that I loved Robert, I never really got that to, but I so liked him. He was such a great, and I think Barry, you said that he had two completely different characters. I think there were probably a few other that I saw. And it's great that we're having this memorial, and thank you, Patrick and everybody else, for putting it together. It's been so great.
Well, I think we're over with the speeches. Yes, we're over.
Patrick, let's hear your memories of
I'm too shy, and you said it all.
No. We won't be here again, Patrick. We may never see each other again. I hope we do. What are your fondest memories of Robert?
Fondest memories?
Wiggy, come on.
Well, fondest memories is really Robert adopting my family. Robert making my family part of his family. Well, he was his family. So my kids grew with him. We traveled with him. We shared things, and it's been the most marvelous experience. Now he's passed away this more than 6 months, and he's still around. He's still with us every day. Anything reminds me of him, and it's difficult.
Yeah,
it is. So thank you all for being here, supporting and being with us.
James, right? Yeah, so ironically, I'm looking at the guy's pictures on Facebook the other day. Okay. And I'm going, he's in Iran, I'm going to Israel.